Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Ready for another deep dive? This time, we're going to be looking at Keystone Realtors Ltd. And, they just put out their second quarter results for fiscal year 25. So we want to kind of figure out what's going on there and, what it all means for the company moving forward.
Yeah, sounds good. And to do that, we've got their letter to the stock exchanges announcing the results, the full financial report, and their investor presentation. So I think between these three, we should have a pretty good picture.
All right. So just to get everybody up to speed, Keystone Realtors, they're a major player in the Mumbai metropolitan region. And they've got a pretty wide range of projects, everything from like affordable housing options all the way up to, the super luxury developments.
Yeah, and so far they've delivered over 25 million square feet of construction with another 43 million in the pipeline. And another thing they're known for is their redevelopment projects, which is basically, where they take existing properties and redevelop them.
Right. Okay, so let's jump into how they did this quarter. One of the first things that really jumped out at me was those pre-sales numbers. They more than doubled year over year. Like we're talking €8 billion in Q2 of FY25. That's up from 3.06 billion the same time last year. So that's a huge jump.
It really is. And what makes it even more impressive is that their initial projection for all of FY24 was only a 25% increase. So it seems like they're tapping into some really strong demand. And whatever their sales strategy is, it's definitely working.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you look at their EBITDA margin. This quarter, it hit 18.6%. Last year, during the same quarter, it was just 0.1%. And even last quarter, it was at 13.3%. So that's another big jump.
Yeah, that jump in EBITDA margin, that really tells us that they're getting much better at managing their costs. So that could mean even higher profitability in the future.
Right. And, we got to mention that last year they raised $80 billion through that qualified institutional placement, the QIP.
Right. The QIP was a big success. And to me, it shows that other investors are seeing that same potential. And it's given Keystone the resources to expand, especially in those mid-range and what they call aspirational housing categories.
Okay, so beyond those big numbers, let's look at some of the details from the financial reports. First off, they had a solid 8% revenue growth for the first half of FY25 compared to last year.
And their collection efficiency has stayed strong, right around 80% so far for the first half of the year. So it looks like they're doing a good job of collecting on those sales and keeping that cash flow healthy.
Yeah, the thing that stood out to me was their gross debt-to-equity ratio. It went from 0.43 to 1 in FY24 to 0.17 to 1 in Q2 of FY25. So it's a big improvement.
It is a big improvement, and it really shows they're committed to this asset-light model, which basically means that they're focusing more on managing projects rather than owning all of the property themselves. It's a much more flexible approach.
Okay, so good news on the financial health front. But what about the future? They've got 41 projects in various stages right now, and a lot of them seem to be in those mid-range and aspirational categories.
Yeah, and they've already launched 5 new projects just in the first half of this fiscal year, which is actually more than they launched in all of last year.
Wow, they're not slowing down at all. And of course, we have to mention the redevelopment projects.
Right, they added 4 new redevelopment projects just in the first half of FY25. That's kind of their specialty, It lets them acquire properties in those really prime locations, sometimes at a lower cost, and that can really boost their margins.
So it sounds like they've got a lot going on, and they seem to be exceeding expectations pretty much across the board.
Yeah.
But what's really driving all of this success? Is it just good timing, or is there something more to it?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors, but one thing that stands out is their use of technology. They're using systems like ERP and BIM.
ERP and BIM. Those sound very high-tech. Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Okay, so think of ERP like a super organized digital brain for the company. It keeps track of everything for every project, budgets, schedules, materials, contractors, you name it. And then BIM is like having a 3D model of the entire building before they even break ground, so they can spot potential problems before they happen. Using these tools helps them build more efficiently, which saves money and keeps projects on schedule.
So they're using technology to keep things running smoothly, and it seems to be paying off big time.
Yeah, and they're also using technology to understand their customers. They have this CRM platform that helps them collect data on what buyers are looking for, what their preferences are, and then they use that data to tailor their marketing.
So it's all about connecting the dots between the tech they're using and what their customers actually want.
Exactly. And, they're not just sticking to the big well-known areas either. They're expanding into these new micro markets like Chimber, Mahim, Versova, Goregaon, Dombivli, even Kasara.
Sounds like they've got a pretty ambitious growth strategy.
They do. They're really going after those mid-range and aspirational segments of the market. And they're doing it in a smart way. They're not just building anywhere. They're targeting specific locations where they see that potential for growth.
Okay, so before we move on, what are your initial thoughts on Keystone so far? Based on these Q2 results, are we looking at a company that's on the right track?
I think so. They're showing really strong financial performance. They've got a smart approach to growth, and they're committed to using technology to their advantage. So far, so good.
Great, but of course we can't ignore the potential challenges. What are some of the risks that Keystone might face going forward? We'll get into that right after we hear from our sponsors. All right, so we've seen some pretty impressive Q2 results from Keystone, but, as with any investment, we need to consider the potential challenges. So what are some of the risks that could throw them off course?
Well, one of the big ones for real estate is always interest rates. If they go up, it can make it harder for people to afford homes, and
Yeah.
that could really cool off demand.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not all entirely within their control, right? Like they're kind of at the mercy of what the central bank does with rates.
Right.
What else should investors be keeping an eye on?
Government regulations and policies can have a big impact on real estate. Any sudden changes there could affect things like project approvals and construction timelines.
So they need to be adaptable and able to adjust to those sorts of shifts.
Exactly.
It sounds like there's a lot of uncertainty they have to navigate.
Yeah, there is, but it's not all doom and gloom. Let's talk about some of the opportunities out there that Keystone's in a good position to capitalize on.
Okay, let's get to the positive side. What are some of those opportunities?
Well, as we've discussed, there's a growing demand for that mid-range and aspirational housing in the Mumbai metropolitan region, and that's exactly the segment Keystone's focusing on. And they're expanding into these new areas where they see a lot of potential.
We were talking about those new micro markets earlier. Can you tell me more about why those specific areas are so attractive? What are they seeing that maybe other developers aren't?
Well, they're choosing areas that are likely to benefit from infrastructure development. When you get new transportation networks or amenities, it usually pushes up property values in those areas.
So they're kind of anticipating where the growth is going to be and getting in early.
Exactly. They're really using their expertise and their knowledge of the market to make strategic decisions.
Sounds like they're playing a long game here, thinking several steps ahead.
Yeah.
But even if they choose the right locations, they still have to deal with the competition, right?
Absolutely. The MMR market is very competitive, especially in those affordable and mid-range categories. Keystone's going to have to keep finding ways to set themselves apart, offer something that their competitors don't.
So they can't just sit back and relax. They've got to keep pushing the envelope.
Exactly. They need to be creative with design amenities, customer experience, all those things that make a development stand out.
Okay, so we've talked about their financials, their growth strategy, the risks, the opportunities. There's one more important area we need to discuss, and that's ESG.
Environmental, social, and governance factors.
Right, exactly. These issues are becoming more and more important for investors. So what is Keystone doing in this area?
Well, they're actually taking it pretty seriously. They've started reporting on their ESG performance, which is a good first step. They're also looking into net zero projects and sustainable development practices, which could be a big draw for environmentally conscious investors.
So they're not just thinking about profits, they're thinking about building responsibly.
Right, and it's not just the environment either. They're focused on labor welfare compliance, health and safety at their sites, community engagement programs. They even have this initiative called Educate a Child. It's a great example of their commitment to social responsibility.
So they're trying to have a positive impact on the communities where they operate.
Right, and these kinds of initiatives aren't just about looking good. They can actually create long-term value for the company.
Okay, so let's get back to our listener's original question. Is Keystone a good investment?
Well, based on what we've seen so far, I'd say they have a lot going for them. Strong financial performance, smart growth strategy, commitment to ESG principles. Of course, there are always risks, but they seem to be aware of them and taking steps to address them.
It sounds like they've got a solid plan in place. But what about all that money they raised with the QIP last year? We know they're using some of it for expansion.
Yeah.
But what else are they doing with it? We were just talking about all that money Keystone got from that QIP last year. We know they're using some of it to expand into those new markets, but where else is that cash going?
Well, they've actually been pretty upfront about that. One of their main goals is to maintain a really healthy balance sheet, even as they're growing. So they're using a good chunk of that money to pay down existing debt.
Oh, okay. So they're being smart about it.
Yeah.
Not just going on a spending spree, but shoring up their financial foundation.
Exactly. It reduces their risk. And it puts them in a much stronger position if there are any unexpected challenges down the line.
That's got to be good news for investors, right?
No,
A company that's being responsible and thinking long-term.
absolutely. It shows they're not just chasing those quick profits. They're building a sustainable business.
So to bring it all back for our listeners today, we've taken a pretty deep dive into Keystone Realtors Ltd. We've looked at their financials, their strategy, the risks, the opportunities, even their approach to ESG.
Yeah, we've seen that they're exceeding expectations, both in terms of sales and profitability. They're expanding strategically into new markets, and they're using technology to improve efficiency and stay ahead of the competition.
Sounds like they're doing a lot of things right.
I think so. But of course, there are always things to consider before making any investment decisions. And we always encourage listeners to do their own research and think about their own individual risk tolerance.
Right. We've given you the information.
Yeah,
But ultimately, the decision is yours.
exactly. We hope this deep dive has helped you understand Keystone Realtors Ltd. a little bit better and maybe given you some ideas about other questions you might want to explore.
Maybe even spark some ideas about other companies or sectors you might want to look into.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope you enjoyed exploring the world of Keystone Realtors with us.
And until next time, stay curious and keep learning.